Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast. We're talking about video games and everything happening in the industry. Episode 171. As always, I'm joined by Jordan.
Greetings, Jared, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Dom, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. And Jared and Jordan, it's great. It's so great to be talking to both of you today.
You know what, Dom? I'm glad you said so, because it is also awesome to have you here on the podcast.
Cheers, mate.
So this week we're going to be talking about not necessarily what we've been playing or what we plan to be playing. We're going to be focusing on NextGen and 2020 in general. This isn't our predictions episode. We'll be doing that as well. This is more so talking about the things we're most anticipating and we're most anticipated for when it comes to 2020. The games
it's great to have
next
anticipation here on the podcast as well today, Jared. I'd like to say greetings to anticipation.
God. Completely threw me off. So the way it's going to work is I want to talk about NextGen specifically because this will be our last opportunity really before things start getting kicked off early next year. We're going to start hearing more about leaks and rumors about the dev kits that are in the wild. We're eventually going to get the reveal events for both the PS5 and Project Scarlet. So this is our last kind of moment of clarity before things start rolling out. Before we know.
Have you guys seen the PS5 dev kits?
Yeah.
Yes. It's ugly.
Boy, that looks like a computer from like 2003.
Also, last month we got the leak of the DualShock 5 that came out of the Japanese patent office, which pretty much looks like a DualShock 4 minus a light bar, and the handles went from being cylindrical to more like the, what did I call him when we covered it, Jordan? Dorito shaped.
Sharper, yeah.
Yeah, Dorito shaped of the Xbox, where it's more of like a triangular as opposed to like cylindrical.
Wow.
So, what I want to start with is defining personal anticipation for games. So let's have a discussion about what personally drives up anticipation for us individually. Why do you anticipate some games over others? Are there loose parameters a game needs to have in order to meet anticipation for you personally? Or is it more of a game-by-game feeling? So I want to start there. I guess I'll shoot first. For me, it's a game-by-game basis. So there's games we already have release dates for that I'm more hyped about than games that we don't. But there's also games that don't have a really set release date that I'm hyped for more than games I know I'm going to be playing in a couple of months, right? So there's really no method to the madness there. It just depends on, for me, where the franchise specifically is, where the publisher specifically is, where I'm at in terms of what kind of games I want to get my hands on and what games I've been playing recently, so I'm kind of burnt out on that style of game. There really is no set standard for me when it comes to anticipation, and it's very fluid, depending on how well a trailer does, or say, for instance, I go back and decide to play Animal Crossing on GameCube, that could dictate how anticipated I am in a positive or negative way for Animal Crossing New Horizons. So really no set parameters for me. It's a very game-by-game feel. Dom, you want to let me know what anticipation means to you in terms of
games?
Jared,
this is a cool question.
Jared, you have said some form of the word anticipation no less than 12 times.
I'm going for the record. Podcast record, baby.
So this is a cool question, and that was a good answer, Jared. So yeah, I agree. Like the viability and what's the word for how close it is? There's a fancy word for that. Anyway, yeah, how soon it is to coming out and actually being able to play it. Those are big, right? Because there's some games where, yeah, you hear about it.
Yeah, proximity, I think is.
That was what it was. Yeah. Where you hear, you know they exist at some level, but, Metroid Prime 4, right? They announced it with a literal half a logo, right? But as far as I'm concerned, that's barely real, and I don't even know if I'm ever going to play that game, Whereas, something that's coming out next month, you've seen a bunch of trailers and gameplay. Obviously, that's more real, and it's coming sooner, so that plays in. And then the easy answers are like, is it an IP you like? Is it obviously there's certain ones, a new Zelda game, a new Dark Souls game, etc. That's an easy answer, right? And then on top of that is also like the developer, the people involved, what's their track record.
Very important.
That's all big too. I mean, a lot of people, especially lately, there's a lot of talk about, that game got the Kojima bump in the review scores, and that game got the Zelda bump in the review scores, and if
Nintendo bump.
And the Nintendo bump, or the Fallen Order one especially, like, well, if this wasn't a Star Wars game, it would just be an average, Dark Souls Uncharted clone or something like that, and it wouldn't.
Or the
be
opposite of
reviewed as
that, the
high.
EA dip, right, where a game's automatically
Yeah.
bashed because it's
Goes in
published by EA.
every direction. But that one
Yeah.
in particular weirded me out. But it's like, yeah, but it is a Star Wars game, and the IP is part of what makes it fun and cool. So you can't.
Exactly.
That's just part of it. But yeah, so like the track record, the developer, sometimes the publisher plays into that too. Where obviously, like we've all said, like, yeah, we're kind of wary about EA published games sometimes, and like you just mentioned. But that's a lot of the time justified, right? As far as anticipation and what you're doing, what you're thinking, looking forward to something. Now, when it comes out, you got to be objective. Hopefully, if you don't want to miss out on something that based on the cover. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of parts, a lot of things that play into how anticipated I might be for something. So
There you go.
Jordan, how about you?
Jared, there are many things within a game that might cause me to give it an anticipatory glance, if you will.
Ooh, 10 points to Gryffindor.
Thank you. But I will say, I'm actually glad you asked this question. It is a cool question because, not even joking, the way I anticipate games now has been changing and is very different. My hype levels and my excitement is just different, and so especially now that I'm older and realizing that things are really up in the air for video game releases a lot of times. Things could change on a dime, and so I try not to set my heart on anything too much. We just saw The Last of Us Part 2, a gigantic game, have this big reveal event, and then all of a sudden they had to delay the game less than a month later. So I try to just, of course I'll always watch E3 and certain trailers, certain gameplay footage to make sure I want to purchase a game. But I am kind of just letting things reach me once they come out, as opposed to kind of setting my calendar around their date. So with all that being said, the things that I look for, Dom mentioned it, is a big one, is that, what's the developer? Who is creating this game? And not nearly as much the publisher, because I'm not going to look at Sekiro and decide not to play that just because it's published by Activision, right? Or just because a game like Jedi Fallen Order is published by EA, I'm just not going to play it at all. Now, I may wait for reviews or whatever, but I think when someone has a proven track record, they usually give you something at least enjoyable, and a lot of the times they can jump like Guerrilla did from Killzone to Horizon and make something really, really special. So I would say if there's one thing, other than, like you said, it being a franchise that you're in love with, that's very obvious. But if there's one thing, I would say, who is the developer? And that's what gets me excited.
I agree.
I do think in the current age of entertainment, we're inundated with so much new stuff week by week that it's sometimes actually hard to anticipate things months from now, because there's always something next week that you forgot you were looking forward to, or something you might draw interest in, because so many things are coming out at such a rapid pace. You can make the argument ratchet as well. So it is sometimes hard to anticipate things because you just get lost in the week to week of so much new entertainment hitting streaming services or movie theaters or digital storefronts.
That's why it's so much more important these days to know who is creating your content. Recently we talked about the show Primal being done by Gendy Tartakovsky, and I went back and watched his Clone Wars microseries, and that's a track record right there. When the guys created Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack, you're not going to waste your time checking something out new from them, you know?
Yeah, to the same point, Respawn, they had Titanfall 2, tremendous game. Apex Legends hit earlier this year, really
Yeah.
solid. So when it came to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, there was some trepidation because of the track record of EA and Star Wars. But in the same sense, it's like, well, it's Respawn, that gives me hope.
Yeah. I'm not in. That's the thing is, this is almost like a Guerrilla Games type switch where I didn't realize Respawn would have this in them. Because at the end of the day, there's still a lot of ex-Infinity Ward Call of Duty guys at that studio, guys and girls. And that's why they're making Titanfalls and Apex Legends and all that. So to see them do a third-person action-adventure, kind of Metroidvania, combat-heavy game is very pleasing.
Yeah, flexing their versatility as a developer. It's really cool to see. So this next section, I'm going to be asking you a number of things. And for the sake of clarity and communication, we're going to be referring to the PlayStation 5 as the PlayStation 5. But more importantly, we're going to be referring to Project Scarlet as Xbox 2. Just to make things simpler. So anytime I say Xbox 2, or we refer to it for those listening, we're talking about Project Scarlet specifically. It's just a lot easier to say Xbox 2, and it's more clear in communication than Project Scarlet. So, first off, for each of you guys, including myself as well, are you currently planning on buying one of the consoles on day one?
Yes.
Ooh, boy. It's going to depend on the launch lineup for me, man.
Yeah, I'm 100% day one. Second, so as of today, right now, as we're sitting talking about this, are you more excited for the PlayStation 5 or Xbox 2? Neither or both, and why? For me, Xbox 2, simply because of the track record they've had these last couple of years in the way Phil Spencer has been handling things. I know that all of my Xbox One and Xbox 360 games are going to be playable day one. They've made that promise without officially announcing it yet. And the fact that Halo Infinite is a launch title, there's already a strong launch title there for my tastes. And yeah, I'm just excited for what they're doing with the future of game streaming, and there's a lot they're offering that I'm down with. So they'd have to royally screw it up for me not to choose the Xbox 2 over the PS5. But yeah, that's where I'm sitting currently.
So the way you ask this question and what it excludes is important. So I'm easily more anticipating the PS5. Part of that is, of course, like their exclusive lineup of games that might not be there immediately, but we know will come.
Yeah,
it's a highly anticipated lineup.
Exactly, very anticipated. And that's the easy thing that anyone would say, right? But in addition to that, they explicitly said that one, PS5 is backwards compatible with the PS4. So Jordan, to your point about, well, let's see what the launch lineup is. Well, that makes that a little bit easier because at the very least you'll be able to play all the games you already have. Just like Jordan or Jared mentioned, is going to be the same on Xbox 2. And then lastly, though, is they mentioned that PS5 will have a 4K Blu-ray drive, which is a big deal because last year, maybe the year before, I ended up buying a Xbox One S primarily because I really wanted a 4K Blu-ray drive, and the PS4 Pro didn't have one. So that was important to me enough that I actually bought the console pretty much for that. Like 80% of the reason I bought it, right? So that's a big deal.
Drive is a system seller.
Yeah, and now I've built up a small collection of 4K Blu-rays that I want to be able to watch, and so what that's going to do is, and I also think from a economics point of view, because I'm cheap and thrifty as fuck, that's going to enable me to, probably hopefully take advantage of some kind of super good GameStop trade-in deal for both the One S and the PS4 that I have, and just put it all towards PS5 type of deal. So,
Dom, being realistic with ourselves, for me and you both, just like I said, there had to be something catastrophic for me to choose a PS5 over an Xbox 2, right? I virtually locked in that I'm going to be getting the Xbox over the PS5. You're in the same boat, I assume, right? It had to be like a royal screw up in order for you to even think about getting the Xbox 2 over the PS5.
Yeah, but even that is like, say it was $100 more and it wasn't backwards compatible. Even if it was a lot of that, the way Microsoft is positioning themselves, to me, it's not saying you need to buy an Xbox 2. It's saying, because no matter what, Sony's going to have their exclusives. So I kind of want to be there for that. But now I don't need an Xbox 2 to play Halo Infinite and to play any other exclusives Microsoft puts out that I might be interested in, especially after trying out xCloud as of late and seeing how cool Game Pass is and knowing that that's going to be integrated to hopefully a large extent into xCloud. I don't feel like I need the console necessarily going into next gen especially. So that's got me excited where they're selling their ecosystem and their services as much as their console. So that's exciting to me too.
So I guess what you're saying. So basically you could be day one PS5 next generation of Xbox, but not necessarily their console.
And which is why I started, so that's why I started everything by saying the way you asked the question about specifically Xbox 2, I'm not so much excited for that, but I'm excited for the Xbox brand and the services and stuff they're doing, so, yeah.
And Jordan, despite you not necessarily being sure whether or not you're going to be getting a console at launch, where do you sit on this? What are you more excited for, the PS5 or Xbox 2?
So, yeah, my anticipation level sits higher for the PlayStation 5 over the Xbox DOS. I will say now this sounds harsh, but there is no way that I'm getting an Xbox 2 day one, simply because I already have an Xbox One S that I got dirt cheap that I don't play Xbox exclusives on, because I don't play as many games, and when I do, it's on my PS4 Pro. A lot of them are PlayStation exclusives. Otherwise, it's probably going to be on the Nintendo Switch. Those two consoles are taking up most of my playtime, and the Gears of War, the Ori, and the Blind Forest that I, still want to play at some point, still have not pulled me over to my Xbox One S, which is hooked up, ready to go, can be played at any time. So if that's the case with the current console, then I'm certainly not going to spend a bunch of money on the new one, because even with their new slew of studios, I think I could wait a couple years, or wait a little bit at least, even if one of those games really jumps out at me as an exclusive for their platform. So we'll see about that. But as far as Sony's console goes, the PlayStation 5, it's really going to matter about, like I said, the day one lineup of games. If we're looking at a big name exclusive from, let's say, Guerrilla, we're looking at Horizon 2, which I think is a stretch, but still likely. Unless that's the case, then kind of similar situation on Sony's side. I still have plenty of games from this generation that I would be down to play, and I'm not sure that launch lineup is going to wow me so much that I need to go out there day one. Now, I'm pretty certain that I'll be buying a PlayStation 5 within the first year of its launch, like I did with PS4, but we'll just see about that lineup.
I guess this next question is a two-parter. So the first part of it is, what do we want to define next-gen consoles? And the second part is, what do we think will define next-gen consoles? So for me, I want next-gen consoles to be defined by the advancement in AI in video games. I think that's somewhere in video games where we can make a huge stride. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Jordan, where I just don't think graphical advancements aren't going to really wow people anymore. I think they're very incremental, and I just don't think that's the
And
the
we're
place
sitting here
where
playing Pokemon, dumping hours into Pokemon, and it doesn't look that great. I hate to tell the world that, but it's very basic looking, and yet I throw it up on my 50 some other inch screen over here and watch movies on the other one, but it's still holding my interest. It still looks good enough to play on an HD screen, and it's nowhere near the fidelity of something like Jedi Fallen Order. So clearly they sold however many millions of copies. Clearly it's not a detriment too much.
And I think whether it succeeds or fails or falls somewhere in between, I think what they will be defined by is streaming. The streaming of video games and how that catches on. I think that's what it'll be defined by. Like I said, whether it succeeds or fails or falls somewhere in between, I think that's what it'll ultimately be defined by. Who wants to go first in terms of what they think and what they want?
I'm with you. I think streaming is going to be a big part of next generation. For good or for better or worse, whether it ends up flopping and kind of goes away, or it becomes a big deal and everyone, it becomes prominent. I would never. It's never going to take over like actual local games, but I could see it being close to 50-50 if you look at comparing it to just TV and movie streaming. But anyway, I wish or I hope that like you said, Jared, you mentioned more emphasis on improved AI. I would add into that like improved physics in games and more like interactivity with more objects, things like that, which I think both AI and the physics are more CPU driven, resource driven things in games. And the past generation of consoles were really lackluster on the CPU side, even when they came out. So I think like hopefully we can get a big improvement there. Like, no, that's just otherwise while I agree with you guys that just improving the graphics isn't gonna wow enough people. I mean, I'm pretty good with just improving the graphics quite a bit, then just add in some cooler physics stuff and so on, and that would make me pretty happy. So
yeah. Jordan, what do you think in terms of what you want the generation to be defined by and what you think it'll ultimately be defined by?
Well, we kind of already discussed what I would really like to see in the next generation on the last show, and or one of our last shows, where I was talking about refinement and how I would like to see, like when I'm playing Jedi Fallen Order, I would like to not come out of a cutscene and have the characters around me like pop into place real suddenly, kind of glitchy. I would like to see just some of those, I think I said seams be sewn up, I think is a good way to put it. I would like to see those seams not be so, the gaps be so wide there where there's, texture pop-ins like you were talking about and stuff like that. I would like to see the refinement be focus there, and that part of that comes with processing power like you guys were talking about, so that'll be interesting how that is used. And then what I think is will happen is pretty similar to what you guys said. Streaming will be a big thing, and I do also think it's important to note that online multiplayer will probably somehow get even bigger and bigger and more ubiquitous with gaming in general.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is a partially subjective, but I do think that they make a good case for themselves. So what I wrote down here is From Software and Ubisoft were the dev-publisher combination that delivered the most amount of games at the highest level of quality on average. You understand what I'm saying by that? Obviously, From Software had a lot of games this generation. All of them were pretty well received. Same thing with Ubisoft. They published a lot of games. They kind of turned around.
Now, they didn't make any games together, though.
No. I'm saying as a combination of this is a developer and this is a publisher. You're right. The wording is a little weird. They didn't do it together. Boy, that would be weird. What I want to know from you guys is, come this next gen, who do you think the A, developer, or B, publisher is that can kind of do the same thing that From and Ubisoft did with this generation? I'll give my answers. One, for publisher, I think that Capcom is really positioning themselves in a good spot with the rumored Resident Evil 3 remake. Obviously, they're coming hot off the heels of the RE2 remake. We have Resident Evil 8 on the way. With the success of some of their titles, they're stating that they want to go back to a lot of these franchises and give people, the experiences they've desired for a long time. There was years there where the Capcom community hated Capcom, like really hated them. And I do think they have turned it around, and I would really like to see them be the Ubisoft of this generation and just put out banger after banger. And they don't necessarily all have to be 9s, but 8s, 7.5s, like just consistently at least good. No
better than they have been.
No Umbrella Corps, that's a weird spin-off for Resident Evil game that was garbage. In terms of developer, I'll give a 2-part answer. One, my wish is BioWare. I really hope with that Dragon Age 4 and the upcoming Mass Effect that it is a return to form. Please. Obviously, there's hope. I still have hope left. Yeah. But I understand that's an unrealistic choice.
I don't think so. I'm hopeful with you. I think there's a possibility, and boy, do I hope that happens, man.
And this might be a cop-out, but for me, looking at developers out there, From Software has some of the fastest turnaround times we've seen from developers. So in terms of the most games at the highest quality, I don't know if another developer out there could match that, personally. Yeah. I do think there will be developers that obviously put out games that are better than some of the From Software titles, easily, but I don't know if they could release a high number of games at that level just because studios take a lot longer in their development cycle, and it's just not the way From Software handles things.
Yeah, of course, we've talked about this a lot before, but I don't think their production values are on the same level as, a big-time studio that is making a highly polished AAA action adventure title. So that is a big part of that. And but if it works, and something to be said for the fact that Sekiro has its own story, cutscenes. Now, it was published by Activision. That might have something to do with it, but it is in some ways a little bit more traditional story and does have those kind of polished, good-looking cutscenes. They're still not all the way there, but it is maybe a step in the right direction. I don't know that they were ever in the wrong, but you get what I'm saying.
I have 2 dark horse choices, and they're both going to be Xbox, so listeners feel free to call me a homer if you want or whatever. But Obsidian, because they seem to have multiple teams that are working on things. Grounded, I don't necessarily think it's going to be a great game. It's probably just going to be one of those in early access type titles. But they had Outer Worlds. We could see Outer Worlds 2 and 3 and maybe some other RPGs from them in the same dev cycle, in the same dev console generation that could put them up there, right? Because they do have a good track record in terms of high quality games. The other choice is Playground Games, which, if you remember, they're the studio that makes Forza Horizon, and those games are always very well received. And now they have a second studio working on the biggest open secret in gaming, which is Fable 4. We know it's an open world RPG. Most people are assuming it's Fable 4. But you figure if they can release a good number of Forza Horizon games alongside 1 or 2 Fable games, or if it's a new IP, which is highly doubted, they could be in the running too, It's hard with Sony Studios because Sony Studios tend to take a little bit longer, but with Naughty Dog being on the cusp, you could have Last of Us Part 2 getting ported or being playable on PS5, and then you could see 2 or 3 more titles from them, especially if they're doing smaller entries like Uncharted Lost Legacy. They could be a contender as well.
Lost Legacy was great, man. It'd be cool to see somebody do something like that doesn't necessarily have to be a full-on sequel, Nathan Drake and all that, since he's obviously not really the main dude in the series anymore. So have you heard about Sony San Diego possibly doing an Uncharted game?
No.
Yeah, they obviously do the show every year, MLB The Show, and a lot of people have been, or definitely some rumors that they have a team working on an Uncharted game because they, first of all, they're close enough to Naughty Dog, and also they had those games that were like free to play stuff on PlayStation. You remember that?
Not off the top of my head, no.
But yeah, but they had, I guess those teams may be working on maybe the ones that moved over for Uncharted. Anyways.
So, I'm going to add in, arguably, the From Software, of the PS3, Xbox 360 gen. at least they would be looked at as probably the top developer or one of, is Bethesda Game Studios, who this past generation had Fallout 4, which sold well, but not as many people were in love with it as were back with Fallout 3 and with Skyrim and Oblivion. And then Fallout 76, obviously most people did not think of that too highly, but
it wasn't made by them.
Bethesda. Okay, you're right. It was what? They don't line up to that, or wasn't it just a different branch of Bethesda Game Studios?
No, it was the one that was in Dallas that was working on a different game, and then they canceled that game, and then they became Bethesda Game Studios Dallas.
Battle Cry, was that their game?
Battle Cry Studios, yeah.
Okay, so
Bethesda Game Studios oversaw the project, but they weren't actually the ones developing.
Okay.
It's kind of like id and Avalanche for Rage 2.
So in that case, then, I mean, Bethesda Game Studios this past generation published or developed Fallout 4, and that's it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I liked Fallout 4, but not as much as the previous Fallouts, and that was all they had.
Ooh.
So
next gen, we're gonna get Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6. Yeah, that's
exactly.
True.
So I think that's a prime opportunity for them to come roaring back and remind everyone, we're BGS. We made fucking Skyrim, the game that doesn't stop selling. On platform after platform, and everyone still loves it, even though it's over a decade old now or whatever. So
well, and that's the thing too, man, is that game became a quick internet joke, but people forget how well received that game was at launch.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Super
well, that's
well
how
received.
it is with popular stuff. The game was a joke, had a lot of memes from day one launch of the original game. So that's just how it goes.
And if they hit with those two things, it's pretty much like we were talking about with BioWare. Like, this could be their redemption arc they needed. And, man, if they come out the gate swinging with Starfield in the first, launch year of the next-gen consoles and it's good, that's going to be really good for them. And on top of that, for us to get two Bethesda Game Studios games in the same gen would be really impressive at this point, It's like Rockstar Games.
And that was a lot of people's complaints about Fallout 4 was it kind of feels like they developed this, in a vacuum, and they couldn't see what had been done with The Witcher 3 and some other big RPGs, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, if you, again, back to the previous gen, Skyrim was good in every sense, right? Like, even technically, everything was impressive about it. Unlike we heard about Fallout 4. So I think that they have that opportunity for Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 to be like, oh, this is, again, great games that are pushing the boundaries of what games can be and what giant RPGs can be. I just see that opportunity for them.
And part of that is expectations, because they built up their reputation to be the genre-defining releases, whereas Outer Worlds can come out and be pretty much like Fallout, a little bit different, not really moving the needle forward, but people love it because the expectations there were, we just want more of this, right? Whereas with Bethesda Game Studios, people expect them to be the genre-defining open-world RPG, and like you said, they developed in a vacuum pretty much for Fallout 4, and it wasn't met with terrible reception, but not great reception. So yeah, they're primed to show up and show out if they hit with those two titles. That's awesome. Good point. I didn't even think about them. In terms of publisher, anything to add?
I mean, I guess
Ubisoft's about to kill it, dude, because they've been killing it.
Yeah, they'll continue to do what they do because they're consistent and they do it well enough. So
the way they handled Ghost Recon Breakpoint when it wasn't so great at launch, they were like, we can't, do it this way. We got to be better, and we got to fix this.
Dark horse for me, highly unlikely, but a dark horse candidate is EA. I'd be interested to see if they could do it, but at this point, even if they were to line up hit after hit after hit, the hole they've dug themselves, I don't know if the internet will ever let them forgive that. So, anything else, Dom, you want to add?
No, for publisher, I would say, like you mentioned, Microsoft, like they're poised to. We're not, we don't have quite the evidence yet, but it seems like they're poised to put out some fucking bangers next gen.
Yeah, and truth be told, though I chose Ubisoft, PlayStation did a really good job this gen too as a publisher. Let's not forget that. Yeah. Not necessarily as many titles as Ubisoft, but a lot of really good games.
And I really apologize for the unironical use of the word bangers there, but it just felt right.
Hey man, bangers and mash can eat some bangers.
No, Dom, it wasn't something that I was previously anticipating, but I don't think that you're a total piece of shit.
Jordan, is there any dev or publisher you want to add?
What was the original question here again?
It's who do you think will follow in line with From Software and Ubisoft this gen in terms of putting out
Oh yeah.
a good number of games at the highest level of
Yeah.
consistency for a publisher or a
Yeah.
dev.
It could be. I do want to give a shout out to, what are they called now? Microsoft or Xbox Game Studios.
Xbox Game Studios, yeah.
Yeah, they're poised to be firing all cylinders with this next generation. So we will. My anticipation level is high to see how they do. It's never gonna end.
Oh man.
The last question here before we head out. Oh, actually, before we give our 5 most anticipated games of 2020, I just wanted to ask: should we expect the next generation to at least last 7 years, including the mid-cycle refresh hardware that we assume we're going to get, just like the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X? I think at the very least, personally, it'll last 7 years.
Yeah, I agree.
God, can you imagine where technology will be in 7 years after the launch of these fucking consoles? They will be fossils.
Well, and the crazy thing
Good
is,
Lord.
Elon Musk is going to unveil the Mako from Mass Effect, since he just unveiled a truck a month ago.
God.
Jesus.
Oh man.
I think that these will last 5 to 6 years at the longest.
Including
Even
mid-cycle
with
refreshes?
iterations.
Okay.
Even with iterations.
Cool. I had some bonus questions here. If we can you think we can lightning round this? We can get all three of them in, but we got to lightning round it.
Go ahead.
I'm game.
Go ahead.
Okay. One, what colors do you think the PS5 and Xbox 2 will launch as? I think PS5 will be black. I think Xbox 2 will be white.
They're both black.
Okay. Jordan?
Black.
Black. Okay. Second, with backward compatibility included in both consoles, will this be the best launch lineup situation we've seen?
Well, that doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, it
You're
does.
Considering that in part of a launch lineup, yeah, of course.
I guess more a
The
launch.
launch lineup to me is the games that can only be played on this system. So backwards compatibility. I mean, if you're talking about,
I'm referencing launch lineup as all the games you can play on the system the day you buy it.
Then yeah.
so geez,
Okay.
I don't know about that, because that's like, if you're talking about there's a PS5 version of The Last of Us Part 2, that's different. But if you're talking about playing the PS4 version of The Last of Us, that's not like a launch lineup to me, because that's technically an old game, or for an old system at least.
Okay, so including backwards compatibility, will this be the best lineup of games available on your console the first day you buy it that we've ever had?
I don't know, man. I would have to figure out which consoles had
Yeah.
backwards compatibility and
You
which
got to know
didn't.
some history on the launch lineups.
But
Yeah. For
I
me, the
will
fact that
say-
Xbox has Xbox One, Xbox 360, original Xbox, and Xbox 2, it's pretty hard to match that.
Also, this question is very hard to ask, because other than the backwards compatible titles that we'll be playing, we don't know any of the actual new launch lineup. For
Halo
either of
Infinite
these
is the only one we know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
two. Okay,
Yeah,
and we know that that's not coming to Xbox One.
Good question.
Oh, true. Good point.
Yeah, good question. I don't know.
So really, I don't think we know any of the totally you can only play this on PS5 or Xbox 2 games.
Good
Yeah,
point.
and I don't think Xbox 2 will have any of those. They've already stated.
Ever?
Jeez. Jesus.
Well, no, not ever, but at launch. So, lastly, do you believe that the future focus of the game industry is streaming, or will it be a pillar? I think pillar.
I think future, yeah, but just
Well, it
long
depends
time.
on how far into the future we're talking. I mean,
Yeah.
if we're, if we get into 50 or 100 years territory, then
By the end of this
I
next
gotta
console
believe-
generation.
Oh, then
Oh,
no.
Then
It's a
pillar. Yeah.
Pillar.
But
Okay.
if in 100 years, I gotta believe that the whole world will have such great internet that you won't need local storage nearly as much.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I'd
let's hop-
say, when you're saying 7 years, 6 to 7 years for this gen, that's not soon enough, or not long enough for streaming. I think
Right.
after that we'll probably start to see it be the primary share.
Yeah.
Lastly, let's list our top 5 most anticipated games for 2020. In no particular order, I'll give mine. Spelunky 2. I hope it lands in 2020. Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Cyberpunk 2077, Doom Eternal, and Marvel's Avengers. So I don't have Last of Us because it's not coming out till mid-year, so it goes back to the anticipation of like a lot of these games I got to play sooner.
So I'll just go because I only have 3 games because I'm really only anticipating 3 games that fucking much, right?
Yeah.
The other games I'll play whenever, if at all. So I will say my games are Avengers, just because I'm such a big comic book fan, and then Cyberpunk because I'm such a big CD Projekt fan and fan of the cyberpunk genre, not necessarily this like tabletop game. And then actually The Last of Us Part 2, because even if I don't fall in love with the gameplay, I'll tell you this much: I am highly anticipating how good that story is going to be. I think they're going to nail it.
Hell yeah. Dom?
So I'm going to go with the usual suspects. Doom, it looks like not a crazy iteration on the last Doom, but that's great for me, and I'm ready for that game. The Last of Us, same kind of thing. I don't expect too much crazy newness from this game compared to the last game. It should look a lot better, and control better, but I'm just expecting a great, dark emotional story, and so on. But that's obviously an easy choice. Cyberpunk. One thing I didn't quite mention with, when we define what gets us anticipating something is, well, this is something kind of new for me. That kind of setting and genre. I'm not really, read or watched too many movies or played too many games in that kind of weird cyberpunk type universe, right? Jordan is thinking to himself, like, you're missing out, man. But
I would say just hit up them Blade Runner movies, dude.
Right. So, it bodes. I mean, it mixes well with, it's a developer I trust implicitly, right, because of what they did with The Witcher 3. But I'm also excited to potentially get into a new genre and try to experience something new and different. It's kind of exciting with that one.
Yeah.
One last game I'll say. In addition, another thing I left out in what makes me anticipated for something, because it's so rare, is a new technology, right? I'm not usually the one to be like on the ground floor, like beta testing new shit and spending a lot of money, but new technology is cool. And for that, after watching the trailer, and this is also a game that I'm frankly just not going to play, probably not for a couple years at least. But after watching the trailer for Half-Life Alyx, holy crap, the game looks incredible. I was a huge
PC gamer.
Yeah, so I was big on Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 and the episodes of Half-Life 2. Like, I love those games.
Man, you would have loved the conversation Jordan and I had a couple of weeks ago when this trailer came out.
Oh, yeah. But
as two non-Half-Life guys.
This is not Half-Life 3, of course, but it looks like a full-on Half-Life game in that world, set in between, I think, 1 and 2, they said. But on top of all that, it's fully developed for VR, a full-price game, right? And the few things they showed in the trailer in particular were, the specific controller that the Vive, I believe, has, where it's like a glove, and being able to actually like reach out and, grab objects the way.
Well, this is on their own VR device, the library or whatever, isn't it?
I thought it was.
I'm pretty sure it said, the IGN article I read said that it was on all PC VR platforms.
That's what I thought.
So
like
I think
Oculus,
it might be coming
Vive.
out on Oculus.
Yeah, but they have there's a specific controller they built. That's like more like from what I understand, a glove, and it tracks your fingers. I don't know. I don't totally understand it, but it looks cool as fuck. And what they showed in that trailer was actually something like when we were talking about like, what will NextGen be known for, and like we're like, graphics, AI. That's all cool, but this truly felt like something crazy and new, right? Judging by that trailer, we'll see how it turns out, but it looks cool as fuck. So throwing that out there.
Yeah, the one game that none of us really talked about, and I'll say why it wasn't on my list real quick, is Final Fantasy VII Remake. And for me, I'm not playing that game until it comes, if it ever does, to Xbox, for the simple fact that that game is technically a chapter of, or a part of a game.
Yeah.
So I don't want to buy the first one on PS4 and then have to buy the second one on Xbox 2, and if there's stuff that carries over from game to game, I'm just like, I'm gonna wait until you decide to, if at all, bring it to Xbox for me. So yeah, that's been it for our next gen and 2020 anticipation discussion. Next week we're going to be talking about our predictions for next year and going over our predictions that we had for 2019 at the end of 2018. Tune into that. Some really funny and interesting things we got right and we got wrong. So it's going to be cool to look over all of those and see what we think is going to happen in the following year. And with next gen around the corner, it's going to be pretty interesting. So thank you guys for listening. If you can, follow us on iTunes, leave us a review, helps us move up in the dreaded algorithm. Go over to YouTube, search Controlled Interests. Will pop up. Subscribe, hit the bell notification to let you know whenever we upload new videos, because the sub boxes are fickle and untrustworthy. And like the videos, that helps us
to anticipate, to say the least.
Exactly. Like the video helps us move up in the YouTube algorithm. Other than that, you can follow us on Twitter at CTRLINT, that's Controlled Interests abbreviated. You can follow me personally at Jared_. You can follow Dom at DomZorios, and you can follow Jordan at Melomotus. We'll catch you guys next week with our predictions for 2020. See you then. Bye.